Hello everyone and welcome to this webinar from Carte to a la carte, Supercharge Your iPad fleet with shared iPad. Thank you for joining us wherever you're tuning in from. It's great to have you with us today. Throughout this session, please think of your questions and direct them to the Q&A section. We'll be answering them throughout and at the end in a dedicated Q&A time slot. This webinar will be recorded and we'll share the recording with you shortly after the webinar has finished. If we don't get to all your questions, we'll follow up with you afterwards. My name is Aaron Webb and I'm a product marketing manager here at Jamf. Prior to joining Jamf, I was working in schools in Hackney, East London, and have been responsible for setup and deployment of both Mac and iPad in multiple Apple distinguished schools. In this session, I'm going to dive into some steps to take in order to make the most of your cart of iPads so you can take the use of Apple technologies to the next level for your teachers and students. So let's get started. In today's session, we'll be covering the following topics. We'll start off with an overview of shared iPad, what it is and what it means for your teachers and students. We'll then take a look at the best practices for setting up and deploying shared iPad, as well as some considerations for your decision to opt for this deployment method. Next, we will take a look at how shared iPad can offer a personalized learning experience before we finish up with the importance of vision and planning to grow your iPad fleet. It's a packed session with lots of content, but let's start off with a little bit more of an introduction to Jamf in education. Now, here at Jamf, we have a motto of we empower student success. And we do that by offering our whole product experience for education. Now, this works by looking at all of the personas that surround the student in order to enable student success. We have our IT admins, community and app partners, parents and carers, funding and government legislation, educational leadership, and of course, educators. All of those personas surrounding students to make sure that they empower student success. And we have tools and interactions and services that meet all of those personas in some way or another. Now, the three pillars that we, in order to help build out this whole product experience for education, is that we want to optimize our Apple Enterprise Management Platform for education. We supercharge our education workflows to empower learner choice, and we strengthen key partnerships to deliver a complete Apple experience. So what does that look like in our product stack? At the very top level of Apple device management, we have Jamf School, which is our EDU flagship product for mobile device management. We then have Jamf Pro, which is the gold standard for Apple device management. Both of which are used in schools, both of which have their pros in which they can really excel your Apple deployment and really extend the experience of Apple technologies across your organization. We then have Jamf Connect, which is our streamlined Mac authentication and identity management solution, and Jamf Protect with our endpoint protection purpose-built for Mac. We have our top layer of management. We then have our authentication and management layer, as well as our endpoint protection. And most recently, we launched Jamf Safe Internet, which is our purpose-built content filtering solution for education. We then have a layer of apps which are dedicated to the education workflow. Jamf Teacher, Jamf Student, and Jamf Parent. On the end, we have Jamf Assessment for those working to proctor exams with Apple technologies. We then have Jamf Marketplace, where our solution partners integrate with our Jamf solutions to extend the Apple experience. And we'll be coming on to more of that later. Finally, our community layer is where we have Jamf Educator, which is our custom education to support the Jamf Teacher app, and Jamf Nation, which is our community where we want to bring together education and IT admins in order to enhance the teaching and learning experience. So all of this is about managing and securing Apple in education. And we have some great success with this. Let's see the stats to speak for themselves. 32,000 plus schools around the world are using Jamf, and we empower more than 36 million students via one-to-one and shared Apple device programs worldwide. Jamf School alone uses more than 5 million devices across 32,000 schools around the globe. And remember, Jamf Pro is also utilized by Jamf education customers as well. So that number is greatly enhanced. So let's kick off with why shared iPad and what is shared iPad in this overview. Now, shared iPad is not only used by education, but also in business. And it's where multiple users can share the iPad and have a user experience that's personal, even though those devices are shared. Now, when we say shared iPad in this capacity, we are talking uppercase S and shared iPad in a way in which an iPad is set up in order to have students log into the device. This isn't an iPad that is just shared around, lowercase s, so that users just grab it, log in with using a passcode that's put on the device that's shared by everyone, or even in some cases where I've seen in schools where they don't even use a passcode, they just pass the iPad around. That is not secure. Shared iPad is secured with the content. It's a personalized learning experience, and it's customized to each student as they log in. So they're utilized with a login, very much like a laptop, or if you was to go to an ICT suite where students would have a username and password, go and log in, log out once they've finished. They can do that on iPad when it's set up in shared iPad mode. That can be customized to each student. It can be agile because you can actually have apps and different setup deployment considering what grade they're in, so they have access to different resources. But the devices must be at least 32 gig of storage and also be supervised. Now that supervised means that it requires a management solution, an MDM solution, which is that Jamf School or Jamf Pro layer that we put at the very top of our whole product experience. They also must use managed Apple IDs, and we'll come on to that a little bit more when we talk about managed Apple IDs and Apple School Manager further down the session. But also it's worth noting that shared iPad is only supported on certain models. So that iPad model is all of the iPad Pros, iPad 5th generation or later, iPad Air 2 or later, iPad Mini 4 generation or later. So that's a large number of devices that most schools have probably got. They need to have at least 32 gig of storage space to utilize shared iPad. But a lot of those models there, iPad Air 2s, iPad Mini 4th gen, I've seen in schools across the globe. So it's definitely something that you can consider adopting your fleet of iPads or your cart of iPads into a shared iPad model. Now, one of the apps that's going to be useful in utilizing shared iPad is the Apple Classroom app. Now, Apple Classroom app is also utilized for Mac and iPad for teachers. So if they're using a MacBook, they can log in. And with Classroom, educators can take full advantage of iPads. They can help students stay on task by using classroom tools to manage those common classroom workflows. They can see the requirements that the students are going to need. They can actually help them log in. So for example, with shared iPad, the transition from class to class are greatly simplified. It's easier to pick up right where the students left off and their work is automatically saved. And when used with Classroom, intelligent caching helps accelerate the student sign-ins by returning students to the iPads they previously used. So the teacher can actually say, well, you utilised this iPad last time, let's go and log you in. So let's take a look at what this looks like for a student. They see their name here, see Chris, they tap on their photo and log in with their managed Apple ID and password, and they receive customized and a personalized experience when they log in. There's also, as you can see down here, a guest login as well, which offers a temporary session without the need for a username and password. So let's take a look at what shared iPad temporary session looks like. So with a temporary iPad session is when a user logs in and out and all their data, including their browsing history, is deleted. So a temporary session, any user can just unlock and access the iPad without a username and password. All the data, including that browsing history, is deleted. So when that guest logs out, everything disappears. But you can't purchase books and then assign them to a temporary session on iPad. That needs to be done with the actual user. So you need to associate a book license with an actual user. So you can't utilize it for that. It also makes sure that apps user require iCloud or storage may not be supported. So if you're looking at using like those Pages apps where actually it supports shared iPad and iCloud use, as soon as that user logs out, it's just all going to be deleted. So this may not be for use for everyone, but it's a great way of actually offering a temporary solution. It might be something that you do want to utilize. It's part of shared iPad. And it doesn't really require that mobile device management solution, again, like what we said earlier in the shared iPad setup. So let's look at best practices for deploying shared iPads. You've seen a bit of an overview. You might think, actually, yes, that's for me. I've got some 32 gig iPads that I might want to reutilize. Or I'd like to use that temporary iPad session. Let's look at the best practices for setting up and deploying that. So first of all, we need to look at Apple School Manager. Now, if you don't know what Apple School Manager is, Apple School Manager is a simple web-based portal that helps IT administrators deploy iPads, Macs, and Apple TVs in schools. Here you can buy content, you can distribute it, you can buy it in bulk, You can easily provide students and staff with access to Apple services, devices, purchase those apps and books, and enable teachers in creating a learning and engaging experience for all in one place. And that comes together all in this web-based portal called Apple School Manager. Now, Apple School Manager is a place where you can create managed Apple IDs, and these are a key component to what you're going to need for shared iPad. Now, I'm not going to go into too much into Apple School Manager. We've got a dedicated webinar for that. So if you want to find out more about Apple School Manager, then please scan this QR code now. There's a whole webinar that we've done that's related to that. So grab your phones now, scan this QR code, and you can find out a little bit more about Apple School Manager. It's a whole session. It's very in-depth. So actually go and check this out. And that's going to give you a bit more details about how you can set up managed Apple IDs and learn about Apple School Manager. So managed Apple IDs are an actual Apple ID that's created specifically for education customers. Your students and teachers can sign in with their personal Apple IDs onto a device, but also use their managed Apple IDs side by side to take advantage of Apple services. Now, we said earlier in the Shared iPad overview that Shared iPad takes advantage of managed Apple IDs. Now, managed Apple IDs and the benefits of managed Apple IDs are that they can be used alongside personal Apple IDs. They're created in Apple School Manager. It supports Federation, and we'll come on to what Federation means in a little bit more detail shortly. It helps with iWork collaboration, and we'll come on to what that means. But collaboration is a key feature of managed Apple IDs. And it also requires for personally owned user enrollment. So it's more than just an ID. Managed Apple IDs and the benefits of using them is that actually it gives you, for EDU, 200 gigabytes of free iCloud storage space per user. It's such a great amount of storage space that you can utilize. That's per user. So if you've got X number of students in your school, each one of those will get 200 gig of iCloud storage space. Your teachers get that as well. So it's definitely something to consider. It's also utilized for shared iPad, what we're doing in this session, what we're going into details for. But other than that, it's the iCloud storage drive, photos, Safari, notes, news, calendars, reminders, backup. All of those can be used with managed Apple IDs. iWork collaboration, as we mentioned earlier. Better security, because actually you're utilizing a managed Apple ID with a username and password. Everything is secure. There's loads of resources in which Apple offer around privacy for managed Apple IDs, something for students, because under the age of 13 years old, you shouldn't be having a personal Apple ID. So actually, this is a great way of offering to that to students in mass through education. And then it's easy to troubleshoot as well, because the IT admins can actually go into those accounts, look at them, but there is a privacy section on that as well, and it's audited and monitored as well. So very fit for purpose in the education space. Now, in order to prepare shared iPads, after you've configured shared iPad with a number of users, and you do that through configuration profiles. So you configure in the MDM solution the amount of iPad users that you want to have on that iPad. So you can see here from the picture that there's a configuration profile, number of iPads, and then the number of users you want to use and have on that device. You then also need to consider setting up a caching server and a Mac running OS 10.13 or later. Now, caching server is extremely important for shared iPad. If you configure a content caching to cache iCloud data, shared iPad saves to the iCloud caching service. So when a user's data is cached by Mac OS 10.13 or later, shared iPad can download all that data very quickly. So when an iPad, a user signs out of an iPad, all that data is held locally and appears automatically in the cloud. And then when a user signs into a different iPad, their data is downloaded from iCloud and by other apps from the App Store that utilizes cloud-based storage. So ideally, what you want to make sure is that you consider, and it's recommended that you plan for users to return to the same device each time, because it's super quick that way. If you've got a set of iPads in your classroom and you've got a cart that's only utilized with that particular set of grades of students, then say like, okay, which iPad did you grab? You had number 1 last time. You can pick that up. They can still log in with their username and password, that tap on their photo, but it's going to be super quick if they pick up that same device. They can go and pick out another device, and they can use another one from around the school, but obviously it's going to utilize that caching server and bring everything down. So it still works, it's just a little bit slower on the login process. And then before you consider how many users sign into iPad, make sure that the iPad is configured with all the apps and documents as well, so you know how much storage space remains for the users. Now, if you've got, for example, 128 gig of storage, and you load on loads of apps and documents that require loads and loads of space, then obviously that's going to go down. So for apps like iMovie, and there's lots of video editing, you want to keep the number of users low. So depending on what those devices are going to be used for, also that's something to consider as well. So you do want to consider the app space considerations. If you've got a set of iPads that are going to be used heavily for iMovie, it might be worth just lowering the number of users on there, so you actually don't divide it up, the storage space, so you can actually be utilized a lot more efficiently. So a little bit more about content caching. We've spoken about that briefly there. Now, content caching is a Mac service that helps reduce the internet data usage and speed for software installations on not just shared iPad, but on Mac computers, iOS, Apple devices, Apple TVs. And as I said, you need to use a Mac running 1013 or later. Now, the user signs out of that iPad and all that data is held locally, and then it appears in the iCloud. This sits on your network and just makes it super quick to be able to do that. It's something definitely worth recommended. It's something extremely important for shared iPad. And it also allows you to configure the iCloud data as well. So it's definitely worth considering. It's definitely something you should, if you've got a Mac lying around in the school, you've got an old laptop, but as long as it can run 1013 or later, it can just be utilized for that caching server. But it's something definitely worth doing. I run them when I was in school, when I was setting up my one-to-ones and shared iPad Apple devices using the Mac Mini. Grabbed a cheap one, put it onto the network, set up super quick caching, content caching server, and then off and running, and it made it so much easier for downloading. The other way and utilize this stuff as well. So if you want to reach out to go and get an iOS update, the first person does that, pulls it down from the internet, it then stores on your caching server, and then the next person who does it, it pulls locally. It doesn't go out to the internet all the time. So it's definitely worth doing, even if you're not looking at shared iPad, but just actually iPad deployments across your school. Definitely look at a content caching server. Now, we did speak about app storage and the user app considerations. This is a diagram from one of the Apple deployment platform guides. It's definitely worth checking out, and there's so much more you can read about this. But when you set up a new iPad, you need to make sure that you've got the capacity. So it utilizes at least 10 gig of storage space for the system. It's also looking at how in which it utilizes apps and media, depending on how much you're going to allocate to it. And if you want to configure this, you can do this in Jamf School or Jamf Pro. That previous screen that you saw, I set the number of users to 10. So it's going to divide that iPad up by the number of users because they could richly log in really, really quickly. So it automatically sets the user number of 10, but you can define that. You need that minimum of 32 gigabytes of iCloud storage to device storage to set up shared iPad. And then also you want to make sure that when you're preparing this is that you look at the app considerations as well. So you want to make sure that you can utilize apps that are created specifically for shared iPad. Now, if you go to the Apple App Store and you look for various different apps, you can see that they're optimized for shared iPad. Here you can do this in Apple School Manager as well. As I said earlier, you can look for apps and books. Shared iPad, and this is iMovie. You can see from the picture, just in the little tick box underneath the iMovie icon, it says it's optimized content creation for shared iPad. So it's definitely worth looking. It's under the subscription in the app. It's definitely worth looking for those because it's actually going to utilize your shared iPad deployment. Look at apps that saves user-generated content to iCloud as well, because if they don't, then you're not going to utilize and get some of that data back. But it's not saying that they can't be used, but it's just something to consider. Make sure that you deploy all those apps to all those devices, because you don't know which students is going to go and grab the which device. So if, for example, they're working on pages on one iPad and you don't configure shared iPad to the other group of iPads, that app to that other group of iPads, when they go and grab it, they're not going to be able to go and download it and carry on with their work. So really best practice is to deploy all those apps to all of the shared iPads, because users can't delete the apps on shared iPads. So they're not going to be able to delete them and then bring down some other ones, they're not going to be able to do that. So you can actually use the MDM to show or hide certain apps. So utilizing Jamf Pro or Jamf School, make sure that some apps are hidden. And as we go back to our first few slides, to creating that agile experience, you can hide some apps from some year groups. So as they log in, they don't see them because they're grade 6, but grade 3s might be able to see them. So definitely something to worth considering when you're setting up and looking at apps for shared iPad. Also, as well, now one thing to consider is that users can't save passwords to Safari autofill. So if you're going to log in and you go to a website and it's something that you're going to be utilizing, that they're going to be a username and password. It's something I use so often when I was in school, that users would be able to log into something via a web browser. They had a password to log into their account. It doesn't save that. If you're on a one-to-one device, obviously you can save it. It's very personalized, but it doesn't offer that in shared iPad by default, unless you use a user configuration profile that specifies that it allows that domain to be done. So it can be done. It's a little bit more technical, and there's more details available on the Apple website. So it can be done. You just need to use a config profile to allow that domain to do it. So, but by default, it doesn't save passwords to Safari. So when we were talking about MDM and sort of things that you can do under a mobile device management solution, it means you can send commands to the device. You can install apps, you can send configuration profiles with what we call payloads, so they can have access to certain resources and services. You configure it all across the wireless, and you don't even need to touch the device. Now, supported payloads for shared iPads include things like you can send commands, and you can allow administrators to configure shared iPad to only show temporary sessions. So if that's something you wanted to consider in the temporary session login, you can just show the temporary login solution. So you don't even have the classes on a shared iPad. It just shows the sign-in screen for a temporary session. Now, that needs to be iPad 14.5 or later to be able to do that, but it is an option that you can do via the MDM, via Jamf School or Jamf Pro. You can set each type of shared iPad session to sign out automatically after a certain period of time. So if it doesn't get touched for like 3 minutes, it will automatically sign out that user. Something you need to consider though, if you're doing that as an IT admin and the teacher says like, put your iPads down for a minute, like if you set that too low, it's just going to log them out. So you might want to balance what that looks like, but it's something that can be done from Jamf Pro or Jamf School. As I said earlier, you can set the number of users for shared iPads, so you can set them to, automatically it goes to 10, but you can set them to whatever you want. You can actually set the quota size for storage for the shared iPad, and you can log out a user. So if someone's left it in, you can log them out remotely. You can delete a user, and you can also enable diagnostics and usage of reporting. And you can also disable that as well. So it's something that if you want to have that or you don't want to do that, you can actually configure that via your MDM. Another thing to consider, I know some schools utilize 802.1x networks. Now, this can be used with shared iPad. It just needs a different way of setting things up. So to utilize shared iPad with 802.1x networks, you must install configuration profile with certificate and network payloads using Apple Configurator or an MDM solution. And then after the device profile is installed, shared iPad connects to the network regardless of whether a user is signed in or not. And there's two preferred methods of doing this on shared iPad. You can utilize your mobile device management solution, or you can actually use Apple Configurator as well. But that's a way of getting shared iPad to utilize your 802.1x networks. And it actually doesn't matter whether or not they're signed in or not, it's still going to join it. So it's definitely something to consider if you've got these networking protocols in place in your school or organization. So we've looked at that preparing an iPad. That's a top level overview. There's loads of details and guides. I'm going to share some of those later. But now let's look at how to personalize the learning experience with shared iPad. Now, Apple offers a powerful ecosystem of learning. And when you invest in Apple technology, you're providing your community with a powerful ecosystem, and one that's informed by over 30 years of experience working with educators. Now, Apple provides products, services, and support to enable learning that's connected, collaborative, creative, and personal, to equip students with skills for an increasingly technology-driven world. Now, iPad is versatile as it is portable with its all-day battery life, so students can take it wherever they want to learn. in the classroom, out on a field trip, and all the places in between. iPad works seamlessly with apps and services that are compatible with school systems, including Office 365, Google Workspace for Education. So you get that personalized learning experience, connected, collaborative, creative, all from a very robust device. So let's take a look at some of the ways in which you can personalize this. Now, we spoke about Federated earlier, in which you can create managed Apple IDs. Now, Federated is a authentication link to link Apple School Manager to the following services. So it could be your Google Workspace or Microsoft Azure Active Directory or Azure AD. And it's the process of using the account's username and password from one directory system, allowing it to use the same username and password to be used in another system. So for here, we want to utilize the Google Workspace or Microsoft Active Directory Azure AD logins to create the same one for your managed Apple ID. So when you get that shared iPad, students can log in with their Google Workspace ID, or they can log in with their Microsoft AD. So it's utilizing those two systems that you've already got, linking the Apple services as well, and then not to mention you can go off and use all of those apps as well. You can download the Google apps, you can download the Microsoft apps, work fantastic on iPad. So it's definitely something worth using. But it's that authentication users from other sources. So for IT admins, one spot that they create them in brings them into the Apple ecosystem, utilize it on shared iPad. It's a great way to connect the two as well. Now, you can also utilize your student information system or your SIS, MIS, depending on which country you're living in, to bring those users into as well. So you can actually have dual accounts coming in. So you can use Federated. You can also connect it with your student information system. There's different ways of doing that, and actually there's some guides in which how to utilize this in Apple School Manager. But it certainly makes the creation of managed Apple IDs super, super easy. So the way in which you can do it, if you don't want to use Google or Microsoft, is you can also upload with SFTP. So you upload a number of spreadsheets, bringing in those users. You can export that from your MIS system or create them manually, upload them to Apple School Manager to create those managed Apple IDs. Now, a great thing about using managed Apple IDs, and one of those things that we highlighted earlier, is the collaboration. So you've got that connected experience, you log in with that Microsoft or Google or managed Apple ID experience. Once you get that, what do you then do with it? Well, the collaboration features and what you can do with pages, keynote, numbers, you can collaborate on presentations, documents, spreadsheets. You can have collaborative projects and tasks. When learning really comes to life, is you can say, right, this group of students, grab that shared iPad, log in with your username and password. That group is going to be creating this presentation. That's a fantastic experience for students. I've done it in the classroom, and seeing their presentations come to life when they're collaborating. A lot of students who don't normally get involved are now suddenly part of a wider group. They're learning from their peers. They're creating some really in-depth, rich content, and that's a great way to enrich the classroom experience. You can also engage the students. Some that would have never had don't know where to start first. You give them a baseline. You say, look, here's a template. Let's go and use that. Let's collaborate on this with other students. It also creates this paperless workflow as well. So we comment on to how you can create that later on with some other apps such as Shobi. But these means that you don't have to go spend time setting up a printer. You can reduce costs of printing resources. You can actually put this straight on an iPad, utilize it, save it to iCloud. You can print them out later if you want to and stick them in a book, but actually reducing that paper workload, that time spent at a photocopier, because you're creating some collaborative digital resources. And that also comes with the ability to utilize what Apple offer in that personalized experience of the accessibility features. Now, accessibility is built into every Apple device. It really does make it a personalized experience for everyone. And the ability to customize that device to suit each learner's needs is absolutely fantastic. It's paramount to them accessing the curriculum, which was not possible with traditional methods because they may have a visual impairment. They can utilize the accessibility features to make sure that that's enlarged the text. You can't do that on a piece of paper without spending a lot of time and effort to do that. And it's not, you don't even know what some of the accessibility features a student may need in order to access the curriculum. But it means you can differentiate learning resources to meet all learners' needs, to be able to have that text to speech, so they can highlight a piece of text with their finger, have it read out to them. It can be read slower or faster. It's a fantastic way to meet all learners' needs. They may have English as an additional language. They pop in their headphones. They have it read to them. It means they now can access the curriculum. It doesn't mean to say that they don't understand what the knowledge was, they just may have a barrier to accessing it. Now, this is the tool to open that up for them. So accessibility features is a great way of building tools for everyone. Put a shared iPad in the hands of a student, allow them to change those accessibility features to reach content. It may be the difference between them interacting with the curriculum and being a lot further ahead than if they were not utilising this in the past. Now, bringing creativity into the classroom is something that Apple does very, very well. They have a guide here, which is everyone can create. This is a teacher guide. They have workbooks. It focuses on drawing, photography, video, music, and there's creative expression that can be built into every lesson. So you could go on a maths walk. You can look at a shape hunt. You can take young learners out to go and photograph shapes around the school. That's a great way of utilising creativity in any subject, in any lesson. And there's a great guide here that Apple offers for free. So check out the Everyone Can Create series. There's some fantastic resources there that really do bring creativity to your classroom. The other one is Everyone Can Code. Apple offers a free app called Swift Playgrounds. There's some great tasks there. Students can just log in with shared iPad, go and access and create some code and learn how to code. And there's some great resources that are available, such as a quick start guide. Everyone Can Code for early learners. Everyone Can Code puzzles. There's some great resources that really do encounter all learners. And even if you're not used to teaching code as a teacher, or you're an IT admin and you have some experience of teaching code, set this up for your students or set this up for your teachers so that they can actually start to introduce how problem solving and critical thinking with coding can really bring this to life. Completely free, put it on shared iPad, utilize the guides for teachers, really get this driven out into your schools. Now, we spoke about Apple Classroom earlier on, about how the teachers can utilize it to push out shared iPad, but it's a great tool available for both Mac and iPad. It logs students in and out from their shared iPad devices. You can log out a single student from shared iPad, and you can also use it to guide learning. So once the teacher has iPad Classroom on their iPad or on their Mac, they can utilize it by the viewing screens. They can launch a specific app, website, textbook page on any iPad in the class. They can share documents between teachers and students with AirDrop. They can select students to show their work on an Apple TV, a monitor or a projector. They can see what apps students are working in. They can mute devices. They can even end a class and see a summary of all the students' activities. So this is definitely something to consider, not only if you're utilising shared iPad, but just any iPads across the school. Getting this tool into the hands of your teachers is vital to success. Now, Jamf offers an alternative to Apple Classroom in its own app called the Jamf Teacher app, and we spoke about how we offer that in our product stack before. This empowers teachers with tools to help them design and focus and engage learners to take control of their classroom and facilitate learning with technology. So this takes it to the next level. It allows users to log into multiple apps. So if you wanted to say, I want to have access to all of these Google apps, but I don't want them to have access to Safari to browse the internet or anything else, Jamf Teacher will actually lock students into those apps. Everything else will disappear. So it's super focused. You can create and manage classes. You can create and manage lessons. Teachers can do that themselves on behalf of the students. Students can actually join the lesson as well if that's the way you want to do it. So as an IT admin, that reduces some of your load of actually setting this up. Students can be invited to a remote class as well. So if a student's not in class, they're at home, perhaps they can't get into school for a period of time, they can still access the iPad and the lesson, and teachers can still have a conversation with them through the raise hand and the messaging. They can request apps for students as well, with a really great feature for Jamf School. So if a teacher really wants an app, they browse the App Store, they share it to Jamf Teacher, they put in a description of who they want this for and why they want it. Automatically comes up to the IT admin in Jamf School, and they can download it and push it back out to the students. So it's a super intuitive, robust workflow for not only just managing your classroom, but just getting the apps and communication between IT administrators and teachers as well. And it's actually somebody offloading some of those management features from the IT admin to the teacher, so they can really empowered in their classroom, even managing the student device, and to the point of which they can actually push out apps to them for the students as well. Now, is Jamf Teacher or Apple Classroom, which one should you use? Well, actually, there's value in using both. They are companion apps. So the difference between the two is that the ability to view a screen on Apple Classroom is not something that you can do on Jamf Teacher, but you don't need to utilize managed Apple IDs for Jamf. If you want to use Jamf Teacher, you do with Apple Classroom. Now, on shared iPad, if this is a route you're going down, you do need to use managed Apple IDs anyway, so that may be something that you may want to consider. But if shared iPad is not for you, but you do want to utilize like the Apple Classroom experience, you don't even need to use managed Apple IDs if you want to set Jamf Teacher up in this way. So we'll check out some more of our guides. I've got some of that coming at the end if you want to utilize the ability of using Jamf Teacher for your teachers, but not go into the managed Apple ID route. This could be an option for you. It's included free with Jamf School or Jamf Pro. The ability to add student images, which we'll come on to in the next slide. You can lock into multiple apps. Something you do get in Apple Classroom is a classroom summary when a teacher ends as well. And you can airdrop content between teachers and students. But that ability to utilize Jamf Teacher to get student images into Apple Classroom is fantastic. A teacher can add a photo of a student in Jamf Teacher. That could be an emoji or an actual photo. It automatically pulls through into Apple Classroom, which is absolutely fantastic if you want to get those images and actually have that ability to log in with images and username and password as well. So utilize Jamf Teacher just to get images into Apple Classroom is fantastic and something worth having a look at if you've got this already and haven't experienced that already. Another app to create a personalized learning experience that Jamf offers is the Jamf School Student app. Works seamlessly with the Jamf Teacher app. As you can see here from the Student app itself, they have the ability to install pre-approved apps and books and documents. So it's like their own little mini app store that's been already approved by the school and paid for. They can do their own app updates. They can update their OS as well. And we can also set see the app collections that are on offer to them. And then they've also got the ability to message their teachers as well. So this isn't utilizing iMessage. That can be turned on or off for managed Apple IDs, but this actually utilizes a separate system. They can message their teacher. No one else sees that. They can raise their hand. The teacher can actually sort of see that pop up on their iPad through Jamf Teacher and actually have an engagement through messages as well. Or they can just go over to the student. This is fantastic. It's something that I've seen in schools where students don't always want to raise their hands in front of the rest of the class. They can do it on their iPad. They can raise their hand, let the teacher know that they're stuck. The teacher can just wander over and speak to them without being embarrassed in front of their peers. So something very worth considering. Jamf School Student comes as part of Jamf School. You also have self-service if you're a Jamf Pro customer. Not as many features as workflows built for education, but it's definitely a way in which you can get apps and books down onto your iPad and personalize that experience for students. So let's now move on to vision and planning, how you grow your iPad fleet. So you've got a set of iPads, you've got that cart of iPads, you're utilizing the shared iPad experience to get that personalized experience for students. How do you actually extend that? How do you move from having just a small number of iPads to something larger? Perhaps you want to move to a one-to-one. You may want to stick with shared iPad. That may be the model for you, but how do you get to that larger deployment if you really want to have that one-to-one experience? Now, there's certain things that you can look at in order, 7 elements of success to transform your deployment. The first one is vision, and to have a clear vision that captures your school's aspirations for learning, teaching, and the school environment. Culture it takes time to understand your school's culture to anticipate how your community reacts to change. If you're going to start putting in and growing more iPads, it's actually going to have an impact on how people react to that change. You're shifting a way in which they've always worked in a particular way or method, and now you're suddenly throwing technology into that mix as well. Shared iPad is a great way of actually starting to show them on a journey about how that can be utilized rather than jumping in full on one-to-one. Capacity. Now, to assess the growth of potential of people, programs, and systems before you adopt and implement expand new practices. Shared iPad is a great route into that. Utilize the teachers to see how well they're getting on with it. Have you got any champions in your school? What does the systems and the processes look like? How is your teaching adapting to it? So even your networks, how is all that expanding and how can that take a larger deployment later on? So utilizing shared iPad and building out what that capacity looks like is definitely worth doing if you're going on this journey. The team of influence and innovators that can help you implement your vision and keep the community engaged. Now, Apple have got loads of programs. They've got Apple Distinguished Schools, Apple Distinguished Educators. You can go on social media and find loads and loads of resources. There's some great programs out there to support you. You might have influencers in your school that you want to actually utilize as well. But having that team of people around you to help you drive your vision is super, super important. Then we have community buy-in and the support that you need to build, sustain, and inspire momentum behind continuous innovation. It takes more than just the school itself. It's the parents. It's who else is going to be involved, whether it's that app developers or the wider community. If you want to go out and do some other projects, like how does the community help you sustain these continuous innovations once you start on that journey? Obviously, a key one is finance. It's something that always comes up. How do you bring this technology to more than just a one-off event? Are you creating opportunities for learning and teaching in a school environment that needs to be financially sustained and developed over a period of time? There's ways in which you can do that. Is Apple for Professional, Apple Financial Services. There's leasing options, there's subscription models, all of this which can be utilised to actually sort of build out a long-term plan. If you look at cost savings as well, we spoke about sort of adapting to a digital paperless classroom. How much are you going to save on printing if you can move to this model? Where can you save on resources? You might have been spending loads of money on these certain books or actual resources that can be utilised in apps or other media software editing or tools. You might have digital cameras that you're utilising. Actually, now, do you need to buy those anymore? Do you have a visualizer where you want to put something under a display and show it to the students? Could that be used with AirPlay on an iPad? Where can you save money and where can you sort of start to build up a financially sustainable model? So finance is key and important. There's loads of resources out there to help you move to a one-to-one model. And then also measuring that impact. You need to identify what your goals are. How do you measure the progress to help you sort of share success and identify areas of improvement? I've worked on a number of projects where iPads have gone in to help reluctant readers. A small number of iPads, this could be used like a shared iPad, but actually measuring how that's had an impact on those learners really does help build out what your vision and plan is and help grow that as well. So it's definitely something worth doing on this journey, is measuring the impact it has on your health and well-being, your digital citizenship of students, attendance there, not just their attainment as well. Now, if you want to go into more details about this, there's a QR code here. Apple do their Elements of Leadership ebook. Go and check this out. It's available in the Apple Bookstore to download for free. It's got interactive widgets for each section, guiding questions, downloadable resources, and also a planning tool. So grab your phone, check this out now, because it's definitely worth something considering if you do want to grow that cart of iPads to something larger. Definitely check it out because it's worth looking at and having a read over to really help you develop your vision and plan for the future. Now, if we go back to that whole product experience, we've obviously got a lot of those things that personalize the learning. We talked about the Jamf Teacher app, the Jamf Student app, but there's also some other tools that we've got as well. But everything that we've got there is required to connect users, manage an ecosystem, but most importantly, empower workflows in the classroom and beyond. Now, one of those things to consider, and obviously we spoke about building your team and making sure people are comfortable and how you sustain innovation, is that we have a professional learning platform called Jamf Educator. Now, that is a simulation-based environment. There's no need to install the apps. In fact, you can scan this QR code now and go and experience what the Jamf Teacher app can do for your school without even being a Jamf customer. You can learn, try and apply it. You can gain an educator badge and join the community, but it's definitely a way of getting your teachers up and running with Jamf Teacher as well, if that's something that you want to implement across your school. Absolutely free, definitely worth considering. Scan this QR code now, go and try it out. Good thing about Jamf Teacher is it works with shared iPad. So if this is something you're considering, go and check this out now before you even dive into deploying shared iPad model in your school. Once you've joined, become part of the Jamf Educator community, you can see all our friends and family there that are up there, many Jamf's faces, as well as teachers across the globe. It's not only for educators, but IT admins too. There's 2 tracks, one for educators, one for IT administrators, so they can actually look at how Jamf Teacher works in their school. Now, we spoke about iPads going home and the wider community. Now, shared iPad is something that would stay in school. You wouldn't really want to take that outside, but if it's something that you do want to consider, that I know you move to a one-to-one iPad model, one of the things you need to make sure is that parents are sort of bought into that vision as well. Like, how do you ensure that students stay focused and don't get distracted on their device when that device goes home? Well, actually, the Jamf Parent app, which is completely free, part of Jamf Pro or Jamf School, provides parents with management controls, giving them the ability to limit apps, device functionality on the school's issued device. So actually what they can do is it resides on the parent's phone, or so it can be utilized on iPad, it can be utilized on the iPhone, but also for Android as well. So if your parents have got Android devices but you've chosen to deploy Apple in your school, this is a great way of controlling that. You can manage restrictions in the browsers. You can turn off Safari, you can set a limited amount of time, you can manage genres so that social media and messaging gets disappeared. You can set location notifications to reduce motion at different times of the day. So if grandma picks up your child, one of your students after school, and the parent doesn't want them to access games at that particular time, when they get to that location, all those apps disappear. So that's something that the parent can set on their device. If you're going down the route, and we looked at financial services and different deployment options earlier, if you're going for a parental contribution model and you want the parents to pay towards the device or pay for the device, and then after a certain time they get to keep it, this is a great app to deploy with that. You can say, if you're going to pay for this device, here's an app that we want to utilize at home, in which you can control and you can utilize how your child is focusing on their student work. So definitely something to consider, the Jamf Parent app, if you want to grow your model from a cart of iPads to a one-to-one later on. There's tools there to help you do that. Another thing to consider, both for shared iPad and larger models, as you want to grow out and get the most out of the devices that you've got, is the integration and workflows with our solution partners. Now, we spoke about the Jamf Marketplace earlier. The solution briefs that we've got on there available, these are just two examples. Explain Everything is one that's on our marketplace. Go and check it out on marketplace.jamf.com. An interactive whiteboard that's got collaboration on it, works with shared iPad. Think about how you can now put an interactive whiteboard in the hands of every learner. You put this on a teacher iPad with an Apple Pencil. They can now utilize this around the classroom. They can airplay it to a board. Is there the need now for an interactive whiteboard with an expensive bulb in it, or an interactive large panel that doesn't actually get utilized that much apart from putting up a presentation? It's something to consider. Would you be able to reduce the cost by replacing those and putting devices into the hands of learners? Possibly. It's something worth considering, and Explain Everything is a fantastic tool in order to help facilitate that. If we want to move away from printing and move to a paperless classroom, Showbie is a tool that can not only utilize that, but also personalize the feedback and really sort of get that marking, feedback and assessment loop going with your teachers and your students. The ability to do voice recordings, be able to do markup on the iPad, it takes that to the next level, and reducing that amount of administration, carrying all those books home, spending time at a photocopier, getting different pens out to do marking. Showbie really does extend that experience. So our marketplace solutions are able to interact with Jamf and the Jamf Teacher app. You work on shared iPad, definitely extends and enhances the Apple experience that you're probably not utilizing at the moment. So definitely something to consider. Integrations and workflows. These are just two education examples, but there's so many more that are available to you on our marketplace. Check them out. Now, if you want to hear some best practice and ways in which this is being utilised, we do a Jamf Breakfast Club. This is available in EMEA, and also it's coming to APAC very soon. We launched in the US last month. There's loads of great resources here. It's actual teachers coming on and chatting to us in a fireside chat, 30 minutes. It's the first Thursday of every month in EMEA. And look out for the Jamf Breakfast Club. Go to our landing page, check them out. There's some stories there that we've already been through, some one-to-one deployment models, the use of Jamf Teacher in the classroom, podcasting, utilised in having a chat with our customers already, Apple Distinguished Educators, IT admins. Definitely worth checking out. It's the Jamf Breakfast Club. Finally, we spoke about our community and our whole product experience in Jamf Nation. Well, Jamf Nation is the largest online Apple community of Apple IT administrators in the world, and we're welcoming educators to join that conversation. We meet up every year at our Jamf Nation user conference, JNUC. We're actually meeting up at the end of September in San Diego, but it builds a social community where improving efficiency, not only with Jamf, but Apple technologies as well. We definitely want to extend that experience to teachers. So definitely, if you've got anyone who's a champion of iPads in your school, or you're looking to find out more, join Jamf Nation. It's completely free. You can go and search some of the threads that we've got there on specific products and services. Go and get help. It's a real community buzz around it. So go and check out Jamf Nation if you haven't done already. So let's just recap on what we've been through today. We've had an overview of Shared iPad, a top level. Hopefully you've gained some more experience of what Shared iPad can do. And then as I said before, an uppercase Shared iPad, not just handing out an iPad and users just logging in or just utilizing the passcode or just even utilizing the device and then passing it on to the next person. The way in which Shared iPad can enhance that learning experience, make it personalized, get more out of that cart of iPads that you've got to really enhance the learning experience with Apple. Some of the best practices for deploying Shared iPad across the school so that you can actually see the considerations if Shared iPad is for you, or you need to tweak anything with your IT admin, or if you are the IT admin, where you need to go and find some extra resources. How to personalize that learning experience and utilize like accessibility, the creativity, the collaboration, all those features that you spoke about earlier, to really personalize that learning experience and get the best out of the Apple technology that you've already got or that you're about to invest in. And then vision and planning, some of the ways in which you can grow this, some of the tools available to you if you're going long term. Think about the progress you want to take, the tools that are available, the systems and processes they might need to put in order to grow your Apple technology or and enhance your student success with Apple and Jamf. So finally, leave you a few additional resources to get you going if this is something that you want to read into in a bit more detail. So for the Jamf School Shared iPad setup, scan this QR code on the left. The Jamf Teacher Guide for teachers, scan that on the right. These are some resources from Jamf that we've got able to help you about some of those things that we've spoken about today. I'll leave that for a few seconds before moving on. And then finally from Apple, there's a number of guides that have formed part of this presentation and actually some of the considerations that you may want to go and dive into in some more detail. So the Education Deployment Guide, which is the steps to successful deployment of Apple devices to help you define your project scope, prepare your environment, enable your teams, deploy devices, but also provide teaching and learning tools. All of that's covered in the deployment guide by Apple here. So just scan this QR code now in order to access that. And for your IT admins looking to utilize Apple on enterprise networks, now this is Apple Enterprise Networks, which also for education services as well. It talks about Apple push notifications, device setup, device management, Apple School Manager and software updates and more. So scan this QR code if you're a network manager, or if you want to scan this and then pass it on to your network manager, because it's definitely something that's an article that's intended for enterprise and network administrators and dives into the required access to internet hosts for a variety of the services that we've spoken about today and more.